You guys, this series is insane. I finished Flock the day before yesterday, and I kind of just dove right into Exodus, and what a wild ride it is. I'm about 25% into book 2, so let's talk about how book 1 wrapped up and kind of where we're at in book 2. So book 1 wrapped up with Sean and Dom's like brilliant plan to make it seem like they don't care about Cecilia by ghosting her and then giving her the cold shoulder and make everyone think that she's basically like this stupid slut who fell for 2 guys and they just used her and ha ha ha, jokes on her. And so she's devastated, and they're like, oh, babe, like we had to make it seem that way. She's like, even to me? 'Cause it worked. I hate you both. Don't talk to me ever again. And they're like, but no, no. Anyway, that plan never works. Like, it didn't even work for them because the people who they were trying to convince that they didn't care about her weren't convinced. So then she just got hurt for no reason. And so basically they work for this guy who's basically the head of Ravenhood, and they weren't supposed to like get involved with her. So like she was their secret. And once he found out about it, they tried to like backtrack and be like, see, haha, we were just using her to get to her father, even though the guy was like, you caught feelings, dude. It's obvious, both of you. So have basically been grounded and they're not allowed to see her. And book 1 ends with her meeting the guy who is the head of Ravenhood, and his name is Tobias. And it just ends there with that, her being like, so you're the real Frenchman. And he's like, oui. So yeah, book 2 starts out, and I'm like, what's gonna happen here? Like, the 2 guys who were our male leads for book 1 are MIA. What's happening? So yeah, anyway, she ends up making a deal with Tobias. They both basically hate each other because he is keeping her from being able to be with the guys that she loves. And she spends a good chunk at the beginning of this book basically Bella Swanning around in New Moon, where she's just sitting in chairs while the seasons change. It's like 8 months later, basically, that she has just been living like a shell of a person without the guys that she cares about, and they have not reached out. They haven't sent any messages. They haven't tried to contact her. So she just feels totally abandoned, just like everyone else has in her life. She had to raise her own mother. Her dad never cared about her. And now these guys have proven the same, that other things are more important to them than she is. So she's like, all right, message received, I'm done. Especially when Tobias comes on the scene and he is like oddly intrigued by her, and they are very attracted to each other, but they hate each other. So they're just in like hateful lust. And she decides that it would be great to be able to sever emotional ties once and for all with Dominic and Sean, who she's just totally over at this point. She's like nail in the coffin of those relationships. I'm gonna sleep with Tobias, and that'll be it, because you end up finding out that Tobias is actually Dominic's older brother, and he's actually the head of Ravenhood. And so she makes a deal with Tobias that she won't tell her dad about their plan to take him down if he waits a month to take his dad down and like take away everything that he's worked for, because in a month she will be eligible for her inheritance, which is the only reason she was even in this stupid town to begin with, so that she could spend a year, her dad would give her her inheritance, and then she could use that to set her mom up for life, and that would be it. and that's her goal. And she's gonna flee and live her own life the way she feels she wants to. So he's like, fine, deal. But he somehow feels the need to like babysit her and like be at her house practically every day. And he like runs this town. And all these people who are in the Ravenhood are just supposed to ignore her unless he's around and says that they can talk to her. And so all these people who she became best friends with are all giving her the cold shoulder, and like, you understand more of what this society is, but you're still kind of confused. Like, you don't really get it yet. At least I don't. I'm still like, okay, I get that they're trying to take down sort of like, it's like Robin Hood, right? Ravenhood, whatever. But steal from the rich to help the less fortunate. But man, there's a lot happening. And that's basically at the point we're at. It's nice because you notice in Tobias, even though at this point in the story we're supposed to hate him, he's very hateable. He's like Sean and Dominic in one person. Like, he's got that introspective sort of like, you gotta look at the world with eyes wide open kind of like personality, but then he's also that like brooding, silent, like alpha male type that Dominic was. So in that sense, I'm intrigued, because if she is supposed to end up with one person at the end of this, which the prologue of book 1 made it sound like she was really only hung up on one person, if it remains to be seen that she was in love with both Sean and Dominic and couldn't choose between them because they both fulfilled different parts of a relationship that she felt she needed. If Tobias could get his head out of his ass and become nicer to her, then maybe he could be that one person that could fill all of that for her, instead of having to get all those different things from multiple people. But also, book 1 kind of made you fall in love with these two characters, and you're like, what's going on, dudes? Where are you at? And also, I'm confused because I noticed that the audiobook has 2 narrators, a male and a female narrator, but these books are only from Cecilia's perspective. Like, you don't get a male POV, so I wonder how they do that. Like, do they just have a guy to say all of the male lines? Anyway, if you have listened to the audiobook for this, let me know in the comments if that is the case, because I've been reading it, I haven't been listening to it, but I was curious about that because I thought that it was going to be dual perspective when I saw that the audiobook had 2 narrators, but this one doesn't, so it just has one perspective. So let me know if you know. Cry when I read a book, so I'm not totally surprised that I didn't cry, but it was an emotional story. I'm not going to talk about everything that happened, but I'm going to like talk about some big points that happened in the story, like the fact that the last time I checked in with you, I'm like, Tobias sucks, like, and he never really stops sucking, like the choices that he makes and his like mental thought process is just like all kinds of just not great. But him and Cecilia end up falling madly in love. Like, yes, she still has like the love she had for Sean and Dom from the first book. Like, that is a very special relationship that she'll always cherish. But Tobias is like it. He's end goal. Their love is like, she just realizes that as much love as she had for those other boys, she was always supposed to belong to Tobias. And so like that development happened, and then as soon as they were basically confessing their love, Sean and Dominic, who had been exiled in France, came back early to like pop in on their lady who they have been like pining after for 10 months while they've been away. And they're like, hey, what's going on here between you two? And they're like pissed, obviously. And Cecilia's pissed because Tobias wasn't honest with her about the fact that like he made her think that they totally let her go and moved on, and like his whole thing was like, if they really loved you, where are they? And made her think that they didn't want her anymore, but really he like sent them away to France and basically forbid them from being able to contact her and come back to her and all that stuff. And so then it was this whole thing of him being like, yep, it was my master plan to steal you away because you were always supposed to be mine. But anyway, it creates a lot of mistrust and hurt between everyone involved. So yeah, that happened. And then a bunch of other things went down. Like, what's up with Cecilia's dad? Like, I mean, you kind of find out at the end of the last book what was up with Cecilia's dad. But the whole book, you're like, who is this guy? And why is he such an emotional robot? Like, she has moments where she's like basically pleading with him to be like, why don't you love me? Like, why did it take you so long to even acknowledge who I am? And like, she just doesn't feel the love at all. And he's like, silence of the lambs over here, just like not saying anything. And like, I just felt like the reasons at the end of the book were not good enough. Like, he just made his whole life miserable because his priorities were all wrong. He was totally in love with Cecilia's mom and just let her go. And it was like his whole thing of keeping her safe and keeping Cecilia safe her whole life by pretending like he doesn't care about them and basically like punishing himself for their past mistakes. And it just makes no sense to me. Like, he died miserable, and for what? For what? Like, they weren't safe. You didn't really keep him safe, and it was just all for nothing. And then it was like so frustrating because you could like see Tobias basically doing the same thing. So part 2 ends, right? So like book 1 has like part 1 and then part 2 begins. And then the beginning of book 2 is the rest of part 2, and about 50% part 2 ends and part 3 starts, right? So at the end of part 2, it's like that big thing that happens. Dominic dies. He gets shot because there's this whole misunderstanding that happens after the blow up with all of them when they come back and find out that Cecilia has been with Tobias and everyone's pissed. She decides that she can't handle the betrayal of Tobias not telling her anything, so she decides to like split, and she's like packing up her things, and all of a sudden the next thing she knows, she's waking up in the morning or in the middle of the night or something like that, and her back hurts and she doesn't know why. And then she gets up and looks in the mirror and realizes that she was drugged and then like tattooed in her sleep. She's got these big black raven wings, which is basically the markings of like when you get involved with someone in the Ravenhood, when they like claim you as their woman, you get raven wings, and that's like your mark as their woman. But like, she didn't ask for it, she didn't consent to it, and she's like pissed because she thinks that one of these guys did it because they were angry at her. And so she blows a gasket, drives off to the garage where Dominic and Sean are and like makes this whole big scene, slashes all their tires, starts a fire, and is like, deuces, bitches, I'm out of here. You all suck and I can't believe you would do this. And then she goes back to the house and she didn't know that like there was this whole plan. Everything happened because of one of my least favorite tropes, which is an easily avoidable miscommunication. If someone would have just told her what was up, Dominic didn't have to die. She would have been in on it and she would have made sure that things were safe. But because of the lies and the secrets, I guess it makes good drama. Fine, I'm here for the drama, but wow. So then part 2 ends with Dominic dying and them helping her flee this situation that's happening at her dad's house with other members of Ravenhood who are kind of like rebelling, and it was bad. So Tobias sends her in a car and is like, leave and never come back. So she gets in a car, she drives away, she's traumatized, she still has Dominic's blood all over her body, and then she doesn't come back for like 6 years after she has completed her schooling. She's like making all this money. Her dad has passed away already, and she has his company, and she's going back to town. She has a fiance that she ends up leaving because she realizes that she's still in love with Tobias and she can't move on with her life. Every day she's just trapped and suppressed, and every night she has dreams about all of these boys that she loved, and they're always nightmares. They're never good ones. And so she just can't live with herself and has to go back and find closure. And Tobias treats her like garbage from the second that she gets back to town, and you're like, dude, this is so far from her fault. Like, really. Everything that's happened was because you and everyone else chose to lie to her and to keep secrets from her. And she fell in love with you and has done nothing but give every single one of you guys a piece of herself, which is so hard for her because anyone who was supposed to love her and take care of her in her life has like rejected that part of her that she wants to give to them. And it's just sad. This book was a lot of sad, but it was also so good. And so what I did find confusing though was like Tobias, the whole time she's back in town all these years later, she's like basically putting in the effort to be like, I still love you. Like, you're being an idiot, like punishing us. Dominic wouldn't have wanted us to live this way. His dying words were basically like, hey, I would like you to keep making my brother happy. Brother, I would like you to please take care of this woman that we all love. And he does none of that. He like shoves her away and then treats her like garbage when she comes back and is like, it was nothing, trying to totally underplay what they had. And so finally she can't fight any longer and she says, okay, I'm gonna leave. And she does. And then it's like almost another year later, she's living in this small town, she owns a restaurant, has completely simplified her life. She's no longer practicing law and like doing all this stuff and with business and things like that. And then he shows up out of the blue, Tobias, and is like, hey, I'm here to claim what's mine. And she's like, dude, what the? Like, you didn't want me. Like, you made it so clear. And like, what is different now? Huh? And now the Ravenhood has somehow infiltrated the White House because she sees on TV that Tyler is part of the Secret Service. And she's just like proud of how deep things are going, and she just knows that they're doing good out there. And Tobias wants her now. So I'm about to start book 3, and we'll see where this crazy train is going to end up. I have no idea what station we're headed for, but I'm here for it, and I'm going to read it, and I'm sure it's going to be amazing. But book 2, man, so much happened, and we'll see what happens next. check back in with you. Maybe halfway through. Book 3 is supposed to be long. It's like, this one was like 430 pages, and this one's supposed to be like 540 pages or something like that. So we're in it. I will see you guys at the next check-in.